got to get this down.
Now we're ready to go.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the April 6, 2022 Urban Renewal Commission meeting. We are happy to be here in the council chambers. And Jacob, would you call the roll, please?
Hi, before I get started, could you check to make sure your mic is turned on? So Commissioner Doug Neely.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Sean Cross.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Here.
And Chair Denise McGriff.
Present. So we have, do we have any?
I am also here.
Sorry that I missed your name.
Commissioner Merrill, did we wish Commissioner Morrow? All right, we have to do that all over again. All right, do we have anyone signed up for citizen comments this evening?
No, we do not.
We do not. All right, so let's move on to discussion items. So we have a very important item, and I was telling Commissioner Cross that it's a good thing he's here today because something dastardly might have happened. But so every year we look at our group and we have elections of the chair and the vice chair. So do we have any nominations for vice chair for the remainder of the year and part of next year?
I nominate Doug Neely. I second.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Can you second your own self? I guess you can.
Yes, you can.
All right. Are there any other nominations to be brought forth at this time? All right. So let's have a motion to elect our chair for the coming year. Do we have any nominations?
Do we?
Well, we'll just do them together. Let's just save time and do them together.
Okay, so now you're looking for nominations for the chair?
Yes.
I nominate Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
I'll second that.
Looks speechless. Would you accept that?
Yes, I do.
All right. Okay, so let's vote on both nominations. So we have Doug Neely for vice president and Commissioner Frank O'Donnell for chair. And
Vice President.
Pardon? What?
Not Vice President.
What did I say?
Vice President.
Vice chair and chair. So you will get to take over at the next meeting. How exciting. All right. All those in favor of those two nominees signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? He said, I heard him. All those abstaining, so I think we have unanimous consent. All right.
Is that type of vote allowed?
We can do a roll call.
I was just wondering if that type of vote was
Jacob, let's just do a
allowed.
roll call.
A combination vote is a question.
Yes.
No, I was asking the way the aye and the,
Oh.
yeah.
It sure saved us time though, didn't it?
I thought it did.
All right, if everybody's good, that's good.
All right.
Go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
Commissioner Doug Neely.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Sean Cross.
Yes.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Chair Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. So you'll get to have all the fun starting next month.
It'll be okay. I've been there before.
I know you have, and that's great. I'm grateful. All right, so let's get to item number 2, which is the Restore Cap update and 6-month extension of an existing agreement. And I'm turning that over to City Manager Tony Conkle and to Mr. Graham.
Thank you, evening. Renewal Commissioner. So tonight we have representatives from Restore Cap, Rob Marini and Amanda McCarthy. They'll be giving a presentation on the work that they've been doing related to the Cove and looking at the water quality issues and opportunities for habitat restoration and mitigation in the Cove and in that area. As part of the agreement with Restore Cap, we included in the original agreement the opportunity for a 6-month extension to continue the work that they're doing. So after the presentation, please feel free to ask questions of Restore Cap representatives or staff. And then we would ask for some, hopefully we are recommending approval of the 6-month extension to the existing agreement for the work that they're doing in analyzing the Cove. So if there aren't any questions of staff, I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Are there any questions of staff? All right, thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Just as a quick overview, we have spent the past 6 months really looking at restoration potential within the highlighted parcels. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A, B, C, D, and E, as shown. And as we discussed with city staff several weeks ago, our focus has been looking at the blue-green algal bloom and water quality issues that result in clarity issues and use issues, trying to develop a solution that ties together restoration with improved water quality. And our focus working with a hydrologist has been to improve turnover of the water within the cove, meaning residence time, how long does water stay within the cove once it enters the cove, and mixing of the water within the cove. We think from the analysis that we've done, there's not really as much of a nutrient issue as much as a water temperature issue that's causing the water quality issues.
So what's the green stuff that's sitting there?
Cyanobacteria, blue-green algae.
Algae? Okay.
So it's often related to dam residence time. So I think the upstream dams are sort of seeding the problem. And then when you have any sort of stagnant water or warming of water, you're having that algal bloom. We really are looking at two solutions to benchmark what options could be. And the first is a full restoration of the site, meaning really limiting any sort of development because we would maximize floodplain and really work to get high functioning habitat, mostly for fish species, because you have so much open water aquatic habitat. Second option would be sort of a benchmark looking at greater development options, really in terms of what public access and amenities might look like. But development of any sort, even public access, requires a lot of thought for flooding and keeping things out of the floodplain and maximizing sort of those water quality concerns. Just as a sort of separate piece of our water quality analysis was looking at the industrial outfalls. There are 3 that go into the cove and what treatment options could be tied into restoration with wetland development. As we've looked at what options could be for improving the water quality through habitat restoration, we focused on 3 main habitat credit types. So these are what types of credits you could sell on either the open market or in concert with another impactor who needs mitigation, sort of what we call a turnkey mitigation option. It's similar to a habitat restoration bank where you would buy credits, but leaves out some of the regulatory approval process. And we focused on looking at TMDL mitigation, salmonid habitat mitigation, so sort of off-channel habitat, wetland habitat that can be used by a lot of the salmon species as they're spawning, and water's wetland habitat for water clarity and quality. As we've been developing our conceptual restoration plan, we've also looked at improving public access. We know there's a desire for access not only to open water within the cove, but to the Clackamette, and tried to tie in alternative revenue streams. I had seen a concessionaire RFP proposal from last summer looking at potential revenue from renting paddle sports boats of some type. And so wanted to see what other options we may be able to analyze to add in revenue. As I said, we've been working with a hydrologist to model flow, sediment, mixing, all of the things that are impacting currently water quality within the cove, including the creation of the sandbar at sort of the mouth. As we've been sort of developing our concept, I wanted to just draw your attention to some of the constraints that we have as we're developing a restoration plan. Likely with any sort of development of habitat restoration credits, we will need to restrict some of the activities that occur within the cove. Traditional mitigation banks often are fenced off entirely with no public access because the priority is for high quality habitat for species. And we understand that there is a desire to have increased access to the Cove. So some of our analysis has been how to restrict access to specific areas of the Cove while increasing the actual use and access of those areas. So it's sort of a trade-off of maybe the entire Cove is not accessible, but there is much more access to better quality recreation than there is currently. That may also include seasonal closures as part of our analysis, which would mean maybe in the winter, some of the dock access could be removed, floating docks, just to make sure that we are, again, maximizing credit types for species while also acknowledging the need for access. And our understanding is that the greatest need for recreational access comes during the summer months. We also are looking at if some portion of the existing trail could be relocated, primarily the section that is nearest to the west facility, mainly because we want to increase the amount of habitat near the Clackamette. And our understanding from the city is that some of that has already been restricted because there were problems with some of the access that was happening. Other goals that we're incorporating into our analysis include a review of planning documents to see if there are specific goals tied to multifamily housing or affordability, and again, any other sort of publicly available information. We've read a lot of sort of community commentary that is in newsletters, just what is the community really interested in from the previous outreach that was done. I know you can't make everyone happy, but we're trying to incorporate everything that's been done previously. As I said, there are some restrictions, but I believe from all of our analysis, we can have a high quality restoration while simultaneously increasing quality of access. We are, in our analysis, when we look at sort of our pro forma of the cost of restoration, taking into account the timing, any sort of large-scale restoration project like this that works in aquatic habitat requires a lot of regulatory agency approvals. And so we are sort of building that in the timeline. We're also really sensitive to the PPA restrictions tied to sediment use and how that might impact some of the design of the restoration, and balancing any development, whether it is for access, housing, or retail, if there is going to be any development to balance the restoration cost, that we're really sensitive to what the floodplain constraints are. So as an overview of what we are working on right now, this shows sort of the parcels with our initial conceptual design. You can see up by parcel E, that is the section of trail we would propose to move in our sort of initial design, just to bring that closer to the wastewater treatment facility. It still can tie in really nicely to the existing trail that is north, but we would create then off-channel habitat, so bring down sediment, increase floodplain, sort of off-channel wetland habitat that is really helpful for salmonid species, and use that material to fill in some of the deepest parts of the cove. So the sort of polygons that are in the middle of the aquatic habitat are the deepest areas from bathymetry. Our understanding from the current model is because of those deep areas, we're not getting really good mixing. So regardless of how much water we get into the cove, either through excavation of the sandbar, which was originally proposed, or our new proposed cut near parcel D, we still need to sort of balance out those deepest areas so that we get mixing. And with a cut the size, it's a 10-foot channel near parcel D, we have increased or decreased residence time. Right now, with the way the sort of sandbar is blocking the mouth, there's actually infinity residence time water that goes in, never really leaves in a measurable way in the model. If we add that cut, we can get residence time down to a day within the Cove. So I think our main focus right now is looking at how do we ensure that the mixing is occurring, and it appears that filling in those deepest areas is our easiest option. We did look at removing the sediment bar, but all of the sediment modeling that we've done shows that regardless of how we open it up, it will become entrenched or sediment filled again within a period of 5 to 10 years because of the sediment nourishment that is occurring near the dam and just the natural sediment movement of the Clackamette. It wants to make a sandbar there. So rather than fight nature, we feel like the best plan would be to work with that and develop something that is going to have flow, mixing, and that really reduced residence time. You can see we've included in here in parcels 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, some form of development, not pure restoration, partially to avoid moving the existing trail that's already within the easement. That could be various forms of public access or concessions. It could be some sort of mixed use. We're really trying to still understand what will fit best for the plan and support restoration of the Cove with water quality and make sure that none of the runoff is entering into the aquatic habitat. You'll see also we've removed the outfalls that currently exist. We would be looking to use that water in sort of a treatment wetland tied into the restoration to avoid putting anything directly into the aquatic habitat. The next steps for us are additional hydrologic modeling and sediment transport modeling, really to make sure that we're getting that mixing. We don't want any sort of layering of water levels. We're doing cut fill analysis, really trying to maximize elevations where we would do development of any type, public access included, so that we can maximize habitat restoration. It's sort of a unique proposal and concept, and I guess just situation in general. Normally we're looking to remove fill to create wetlands, and then we have to make some sort of mountain or off-haul. In this case, we actually need to get sediment to make our aquatic habitat not as deep. So it's a little bit of a twist on what most people think about for habitat restoration with salmonids. We need to do outreach to DEQ for sediment use just to make sure that we're consistent with all of the existing requirements. And we need to conduct outreach to potential mitigation purchasers. So this would include potentially WES or PGE. Some of the ongoing litigation that's going on, we know that there's a great demand for these mitigation credits. We're also working on sort of conceptual development planning for access and amenities and or mixed use just to see what complements the restoration in terms of funding. We think the restoration as planned to fix water quality will cost between $7 and $10 million because of the amount of earthwork that's required. We do think that it can easily be offset through mitigation credit sales or some form of balance with mixed development of some sort. And I think most importantly, it's that detailed financial analysis. We want to make sure that it's phased and works for any sort of investment breakdown. And shown here is just sort of the modeling of the 10-foot wide channel cut to show sort of that water is going in and out. But you can see there is still this question of mixing. Just because water is going in and then pushing other water out doesn't mean that it's mixing well. And the lower images of the current bathymetry, so you can see those dark blue areas are the deepest portions that we would be looking to fill. And our goal would be to keep water sort of depth between 4 to 6 feet, so it would still be sort of a quite usable facility for swimming or paddle boats, boating of any kind. We're not talking about sort of land or islands in the middle. We're talking about just leveling out those deepest areas to get mixing. And I think that's everything for our summary.
Are there any questions?
On the upstream cut during high flows on the Clackamette, is that going to require a lot of maintenance to have that not wash out?
No, our goal working with the engineers to make sure there would be no maintenance. In fact, for our restoration plan and to get credits, we have to ensure there's not management or maintenance required. So we have to make sure that based on all of our modeling, that there will not be undercutting or erosion that will impact stability.
I was in contact with the district biologist for the lower Willamette, which of course includes the Clackamette, and also one of their person does spawning surveys. And apparently that gravel bar there is one of the densest lamprey spawning areas in the lower river. So it's a sensitive area. There was, early on when we were talking about the Cove, we were talking about dredging and so forth. I don't even think that would be permitted anymore.
No, we don't want to do that.
And I don't think it can be done.
No, I mean, I think that there are a lot of species that use that sediment bar, and that's more of what we want to create in some of the area near the west parcel with that sort of, we want off-channel habitat.
I'll say this, a number of us up here are intimately familiar with this because we've dealt with it for years. And I appreciate spawning beds, but the only way they're going to spawn currently with the height of that is if they can climb out on the dry land to spawn because it's high. So my questions are, the two proposals you're putting forward, they're not mutually exclusive. We've got recreation and natural development and promotion of native flora and fauna. If you would call up that site there where it's broken into sections, that would be helpful. That'll work. Right there would work.
I don't know.
Well, no, go back one more. There you go.
You do it manually?
This is the slide you need. Okay.
Thank you.
So I know our goal was development of those numbered 3 through 7, and that would still be a worthwhile endeavor. I can see public use and access on lot 1, which would make perfect sense. I'm focused as you are on water quality, because if that thing looks like a frog pond, nobody's going to want to be there. And I'm curious, we've had these presentations that relied upon title exchange on the area. You see the area where the gravel bar is. I don't think that's valid. I've had a lot of conversations, and I'm sure Commissioner Neely has, about the cut and approval for that and Andromedas or migratory species. At one point, someone was proposing percolated pipe, subterranean. I'm curious, have you done any water analysis that evidences contaminants from any upstream or higher elevation lands where runoff?
So far, looking at what is been done in the past and is available, there is not really any point source that's been identified, and there's not, other than the sort of TMDL analysis that's been done, we don't think it's a sort of nutrient problem, although there certainly are concerns with elevated TMDL within the Clackamette. Our model certainly shows that there is no real tidal influence right now with that sediment bar. So it's unlikely now or in the future that really we're going to be getting a lot of tidal action. That's not what's going to influence the hydrology. It does show that water can leave the cove easily at that area, but it's sort of on the downstream side of the sediment bar. Upstream, it's almost completely blocked there, which is why we're proposing, yeah. And you can sort of see, even though it looks like there's sort of a channel there, there is no water movement going that way. We do show that sort of that proposed cut. It's approximately a 10-foot wide cut that we were looking at, although we're trying to model other options. Wider could be better, but we want to make sure we're not entrapping or making our permitting challenging with NOAA nymphs. Does really increase flow and then decrease residence time to less than a day from infinity. So it's from all of our modeling so far, it looks like it really would get that water going in and out. But again, it's the mixing that we're more concerned with now. We have not done more tidal sort of analysis than what is at the sort of tide gate. So our next step would be to do some cross sections with the engineer and really get more detail on what is happening at the outflow of the cove, the area shown in red, with tides. But the hydrologist guess, based on what we have, is that there is not much tidal influence there.
Visually, I would agree with that. I'm not here to run the project. I'm just expressing prior concerns. I'm expressing the concerns about the ease or difficulty of getting a permit for that channel you speak about. I think that could be very challenging. I hope we succeed. We want to, I mean, the water quality there is of premier importance, but so is the restoration of those adjoining areas. And my question more to the project itself is the sources of funding for this $7 to $10 million. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We're still looking at sort of what the mitigation credit sales would look like. I've identified, as I said, probably 5 needs, including PGE, WES, the Lake Oswego Tie Guard intake. The RIPS intake is currently in litigation that will require mitigation. Our goal would be to cover all of the costs of restoration with pre-sales of mitigation credits.
Very good. Now, that was going to be my next question. If you had any forecast on potential revenue streams from mitigation credits?
There are some other opportunities for funding for restoration, collaborations of local nonprofits and river groups. There's WRDA funding that the federal government offers to cover sort of the 401 certification mitigation process tied to the core process that is renewed every 5 years. So we're looking at some other sort of short-term funding. We like to layer opportunities, knowing some of these agreements take a while to put in place.
So the choices we make on the balance between, say, restitution to natural habitat versus commercial development, does that balance impact our ability to glean restoration credits?
No, I think the impact to getting restoration credits is really how we're promoting long-term viability and success of the habitat itself.
Okay.
So that goes into restricting types of access, likely no motorized boats because we don't want to deal with fuel spills or fuel issues. Those things are much more likely to impact your ability to get sort of that conservation easement and get your credits.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. You answered all my questions, and thank you for that.
Questions? I guess my question was, as part of the restoration documentation, will you be making some recommendations about how to help us provide educational opportunities in terms of, some recommended signage, besides just keep out, but, why it's important? I know, let's just face it, people are people. And if they see some sort of a bank or a shore, they're going to want to go and be on it. But I think that it's important that we balance the environmental considerations with the development. And I think we could probably, I feel that we can have both of those, but maybe the development to a little lesser degree with a little more emphasis on the habitat, because who wants to live in a unit that overlooks as you said, a frog pond? They wouldn't. So it's probably in the best interest to try to make this the best it possibly can be, knowing that it was not there originally and not created. By nature, it was created by Jack Parker, so we'll throw Jack under the bus here. So you were talking about the portion where you showed where it was deep. So how deep is, I mean, I've only been in the Cove probably a couple of times since it was renamed the Cove, but I was in Parker's Lagoon several times, but not a pleasant experience.
So some of the deepest areas are about 12 feet below sort of the tide line, the way that it's measured. It's not
Right, it's not
surface,
yeah, it's not,
which is
yeah.
a little confusing. So it's about 14 feet from surface depth.
Okay.
And so those areas would need about 9 or 10 feet of fill to get them sort of evened up with the rest of the cove. In terms of access, we currently have a mitigation bank in Linton and are quite adept at sort of both the education and access pieces, as well as making areas not palatable to go into. We believe strongly in planting blackberry and nettle and sort of naturally prohibitive vegetation that helps wildlife, but makes people not want to go there, but it looks nice.
Yeah.
But we also really want there to be interpretive panels and education, as well as opportunities for guided tours. So areas that are off access to the public does not necessarily mean no access. It just means very intentional access. And so we've been thinking about doing, twice a year guided tours or ethnobotanical collections for first foods and things of that nature. And we really want any of our projects to really tie into the community so that people are proud of where they live and then take care of it.
Are you familiar at all with the restoration work that they did adjacent to Zidell Yards on the Willamette? It's been a number of years now, and I happened to be through there about a year ago, and I was really amazed at how much the vegetation had grown, because it was completely stripped. Obviously, there were shipbuilding there, and they donated a piece of the property to do a restoration with native plantings and all of that, and it actually turned out quite well. Access is restricted there as well. You can see it from the river if you're paddling or whatever, but it's not for you to disembark and have a picnic or anything of that sort.
I'm familiar with that. Also, our project on Linton is very similar.
Okay.
It's about 2 miles downriver.
Okay.
I have one other question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Assuming this committee extends this for another 6 months, at the conclusion of that 6 months, will you be at a point where you can give us specific approaches to how to accomplish this and a plan of action?
I mean, that's our goal. For us, because we're doing this at risk with our own money, we want an answer to know how to proceed. Some of the actual agreements take a lot longer than 6 months to get the pre-sales of credits and really buy-in from the regulatory community. But our goal would be to have a sort of 30% design that we feel is achievable.
All right. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to entertain a motion. Yep.
I have one quick
Okay,
question.
go right ahead.
You're allowing non-motorized boats in your proposal. What about swimming?
We would allow swimming, really trying to just keep fuel and things that may negatively impact water quality.
Okay, thanks.
Rethink that. Swimming and work involves being on a bank somewhere or a dock or something to that effect.
Right now, in the concept I put in, I think 3 or 4 floating docks that could be removed seasonally.
Okay.
And so we would really focus where swimming and certain activities take place.
Okay.
But that's also where we would have, concessions or easy access and parking.
Okay.
I'm going to ask one more question.
Okay.
Do you foresee access to the Clackamette River through either your proposed channel or through the existing channel with sandbar?
In both places, I was looking at having access. I think it depends if we introduce a second sort of cut south of the sandbar. But in both places, people want to get to the Clackamette. So what we have found is if we don't provide access, people will make access. So I'd much rather have control of where the access occurs and make it sort of a nice, attractive place that they don't want to go into sort of the Willow, Blackberry areas.
Yeah, I was talking about, there's a difference in access between a kayaker that can throw it over the bank or...
No, we would have some sort of
or a larger
launch area.
A larger maritime vehicle, like a 14 or 15 foot power boat. You don't see, do you think they'll have access to the cove?
I was not planning for any sort of motorized boats,
Good.
but that would be some place that people would have to come from the Willamette, I think.
I agree with that approach. Thanks.
I think there's a way you can do the access so only non-motorized or,
Sure.
can get through and they can't, so.
Yeah, you can carry it over.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Done it.
all right, done it, yeah. All right, we're ready to entertain a motion, please.
I move to extend for 6 months the existing agreement with Restore Cap.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Would you call the roll?
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Doug Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Abstain.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Sean Cross.
Yes.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Chair Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you so much. We look forward to this.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the minutes, items 3, 4, and 5, minutes of October 20th, November 3rd, and November 16th of 2021. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes for October 20th, 2021, November 3rd, 2021, and November 16th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the minutes from October, November, and November. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Doug Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Sean Cross.
Yes.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Chair Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so next we have communications, item number 6. So I'm calling the wizard of finance, Mr. Matt Zook.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's good to be with you again, yet on a second evening this week. And as you know, last night we took a little bit more time into this topic, and you had a snapshot presented to you that is part of tonight's presentation, but it's a little bit further down into the report. Tonight, what you're getting is the final official annual financial report for the Urban Renewal Agency dated June 30, 2021. There is included with the financial statements is also a letter from our audit firm, Marine and Company, addressed directly to the board, which is part of their requirement. In essence, the financial statements were presented and reviewed and issued a clean or unmodified opinion. And, the summary, in essence, the highlight of the report and the position of the Urban Renewal Agency as of that point was that there was an improvement over the previous year in the net position. The Urban Renewal Agency has no debt, and essentially their assets on hand are capital assets and cash. So this information is being presented to you as information, not really in consideration, but you're welcome to ask any questions for me this evening. So,
Are there any questions? It was, just for the record, it was noted by me that a real person signed the document as requested and not just this anonymous company. I would think if they did a great job, they'd want to put their name on it and recognize their work. Mr. Conkle, do we need to do anything with this? We don't need to vote on it, we just sort of bless it and move on.
It's informational and answer any questions you may have.
All right. No questions, fantastic. All right, so it has been officially blessed and anointed. All right. Are there any other communications, Mr. Conkle?
There are not tonight, no.
Anything from the commissioners? All right, I move that we adjourn. We're done.